get off our...
Greetings, viewers! Deiter here, bringing you another review. So, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll know I was posting about having revisited a webcomic that I read in, I'm gonna say the early 2000s, called Namir, Deiter, a furry webcomic created by Isabel Marks and her husband Terrence. Well, like Beastars, I don't think you have to be a furry in order to enjoy the comic, partly because the characters rarely ever acknowledge the fact that they're animals, except the character Joy Satu, who sheds her pink fur for a white coat every winter due to being a rabbit, and a few other throwaway instances, and partly because this has some really good writing. I'm not joking when I say this is some of the most mature writing I've seen in a webcomic about cartoon anthropomorphic animals. And I don't mean there's like a lot of swearing and talk about sex either, no. I mean mature themes like learning to accept things as they come, bitterness, feeling that you haven't really gone anywhere with your life, etc. Family is also a recurring theme in this comic, and it's mainly because most of the characters don't have the most stable family lives, having either absentee parents or reunite with estranged siblings. Now, I'm not going to say that there aren't any sex jokes in this comic, but they're never blatantly in your face about it and more innuendos. And the sex talk in this comic is honestly pretty tastefully done. Isabel and her husband have worked on 2 other comics. You Say It First, which focuses on the hedgehog Brisbane Adams, and a rabbit named Kimberly Taylor as they begin to form a relationship after the vaudeville theater they were working at shuts down. And there's Nicole and Derek, which is a spin-off of Namir, Deiter, and You Say It First, that continues on after the 2 other comics come to their conclusions. Yeah, maybe I'll get to those in the future. If my research is right, Namir is Arabic. It means leopard or panther, which is funny because we never see one in the whole comic, and Deiter is apparently German for warrior / army of the people. If I'm mistaken or mispronouncing any of these, please correct me. I searched with the translation of these words several times, and while Google kept correcting Deiter as Deiter, these were the most consistent results I got. I'm going to be swelling quite a bit here, considering the comic ended in 2015, and seems to be relatively obscure. I doubt it'll be terribly sore at me. Namir Deiter is about a cat named Tipper Namir, who lives with her older sister Snickers, yes really, since they have absentee parents. Even though their parents are mentioned a few times in the early comics, their mom and dad are sort of scumbags, the mom being a complete whore, and the dad just kind of abandoning them, although he does come back in 2 storylines, taking legal custody of Tipper, seemingly just to piss off his wife and Snickers. Tipper pretty much becomes the star of this comic, after her sister, their friend Joy, and maybe cousin Blue all move on to college. Well, Joy moves on to college at least. Blue is the slacker type of character, and Snickers got drunk out of frustration towards her mother and married the unlike nice guy Twix Dorp, who she was dating. For the first 5 years of the comic, Snickers and Twit pretty much act as surrogate parents for Tipper, and I'd say they're pretty good at it. Sorta, kinda. Snickers has had to be both mother and sister to Tipper, since their own parents decided they, didn't want a parent. And Twix treats Tipper like his own daughter rather than his sister-in-law. Without her big sis and the other 2 girls around school, Tipper has to make new friends, which she does in the form of Gabby Ramos, and gets the unwelcomed attention of a guy named Cedric Von Helgen. Yeah, the first few comics featuring this guy have the gag of him being fixated on her physical beauty, and Tipper trying to avoid him whenever she can. However, when they both get trapped in the school's art closet, yeah, they call it shack, but it doesn't look like one, during a fire drill, they actually get to know each other and start dating. There's also Talmor, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, who is Tipper's second love interest, and Cedric's best friend, as if a love triangle. That results in Cedric breaking up with Tipper after prom wasn't enough high school school drama. Turns out, Elmore's in an arranged marriage, and the news that he'll be moving away to be with his fiancée after high school pretty much rips out poor little Tipper's heart. When Tipper enters college herself, she meets student teacher Charles O'Donnell. He comes off as such a prick to her on their first meeting, but she tells him off after class, and that apparently causes him to become infatuated with her. Turns out, Charles and Gabby are cousins, and when Gabby realizes Charles has a thing for Tipper, Gabby does her best to get those two together as a couple. It sort of takes a while, what with Tipper still considering Charles a jerk and all, and Charles more or less being the nervous love-struck guy. But Tipper does eventually start to warm up to Charles, and becomes much more friendly towards him, feeling that Charles would be much nicer if he was dating someone. Tipper sets him up on a date with Joy. Neither Charles or Joy are compatible, and Tipper seems to suffer heart pangs, beginning to have feelings for Charles. Once Tipper realizes that Charles is attracted to her, she doesn't react in revulsion, but more asks him what his genuine feelings towards her are, and they become a couple after being honest with each other. I also enjoy how Tipper develops throughout the comic, going from a naive and judgmental teenage girl to a mature and supportive woman. While she may have had feelings for Talmor during high school, she realizes that having feelings for someone who can't love her back isn't healthy for her or fair to the guy she's dating. And yet, even though she makes an effort to play nice with Talmor's fiance and tries to love him as nothing more than a friend, the revelation that he's going to be moving away still really hurts her. She originally thinks that Charles is a jerk, not helped by his attitude of intentionally pushing people away due to being sort of antisocial, but the more time she spends around him, the nicer she becomes and tries to get him to come out of his shell. That isn't to say she still doesn't have her more childish moments. When she gets an MMO game, she creates a character based on Charles's personality, then becomes emotional when his character rejects hers and takes it out on the actual Charles. Tipper may be the flagship character of the comic, but her friends and family have character arcs of their own that span over the 16 years of this comic's run, and I'll be going over 3 of them. I'll be starting with Blue since she's probably my favorite character. Like the Namir sisters, Blue didn't have a great childhood. In fact, it was so bad she ran away from her mother when she was 10 and was adopted by her sister Roxanne, who raised her as a surrogate mother well into her teens, and filed a restraining order against their biological mother due to how toxic she was. In 2007, we learned that Blue's mom had a tryst with a rabbit named Mr. Telford. That resulted in the birth of Blue's half-brother, Isaac, who seeks her out years later. At first, Blue refuses to believe this, but has to ultimately admit it to herself when their dad shows up at her front door looking for Isaac. They sort of reconcile after years of Blue resenting him for leaving her with her mother due to the woman having legal custody, and Blue and Isaac sort of bond. At some point, Isaac moves in with Blue and Joy and starts dating his sister's best friend, which is predictably awkward fun for everyone involved. Another arc for Blue is when she becomes a bartender at a place called Martini Tuesdays, and canvases their dates to enter in. This is mostly around the time Isaac comes into Blue's life, and during this time, Blue is having some self-hatred issues due to her past of being sort of loose with men. She tries to be able to have more like Joy and Snickers, but after she scares off Isaac by coming onto him, she didn't know he was her brother, it makes her resent herself for slipping back into old behavior. The relationship between Blue and Ian is sort of rocky, especially considering when his marriage was on the verge of ending when she came along, and then he agrees to go to a couples retreat with his ex-wife. While he's away, Blue's left in charge of the bar, and she meets his son Gavin, who claims ownership of the bar and drops a major bomb on Blue. Ian had a heart attack while at the retreat. Blue's distraught, then enraged, when she discovers that Ian had always been a big dirty cheater. Yeah, turns out, Ian had been cheating on his wife with Blue and several girls at Galvin's school. So while he seemed like a decent guy, he was secretly always a scumbag. The only good thing to come out of this is Blue and Galvin sort of becoming partners and running the bar together. Is Blue's development as good as Tipper's? debatable. I know her development has its merits, but I can't really say it's equal to the development that Tipper goes through. At the start of the comic, her main concerns are hooking up with any good guy she lays eyes on and having a good time, but over the course of the comic, she becomes more responsible while not completely losing her sarcastic personality. I also enjoy her relationships with Joy and Isaac, since the three of them play off each other in the best ways, whether the situation is meant to be serious or silly. Next on the list is Joy, the pink bunny girl I mentioned earlier. While her family life is more stable, Joy has her own dramas. Mostly relationship drama from what I remember. It's honestly hard to say which boyfriend was worse for Joy, Bob Dorp or Dr. Ferdinand Fitzgerald. Neither are intentionally terrible, but neither man was good for Joy's emotional health either. While Bob was a legit nice guy, he was also dim, had very little motivation, and when it came to facing any sort of commitment in a relationship, he'd rather pursue his own flights of fancy, like when he left Joy to go eat all kinds of cheese in France, which resulted in Joy dying of her white of depression. Ferdinand was also a nice guy. He was certainly willing to help Joy get ahead in life, but that also seemed to be the problem. The longer their relationship went on, it seemed like Joy was dependent on Ferdinand, who was sort of pushing for her to become a nurse, even though she wasn't sure that was what she wanted to do with the rest of her life. He also let his mother's opinion of Joy affect his relationship with the girl, which resulted in a rather nasty breakup. Then there's the fact that sometime after Isaac moved in with her and Blue, they started dating. I mean, Isaac always had this sort of attraction towards Joy, but I can't find where that attraction became mutual. It just sort of happens. Dating your best friend's sibling is always messy, since if it doesn't work out, it could end badly for everyone involved. Didn't know that Isaac was still in college when they got together, and he wasn't exactly prepared to support someone in a long-term relationship. Regardless, Isaac did make attempts to make himself a man worthy of Joy, and well, you'll have to read the comic to find out how that goes. I honestly can't say I paid attention to Joy as a character on my first reading of the comic. Actually, let me correct myself. I didn't pay that much attention to her stories when she was dating someone. Mostly Bob, because, well, Bob himself is a rather unlikable character, even in the universe, due to how complicit he is to stay where he is in life, and the emotional harm he causes Joy when they break up. I honestly think Joy's a more interesting character when she isn't romantically involved with someone. Not that I think the stories where she is dating someone aren't good, it's just that Joy seems to choose partners that really aren't right for her. Other story arcs include a bit of a love triangle between herself, Bob, and Blue's bitchy younger cousin Mallory, and Joy does get involved in the shenanigans of Blue and Isaac, and those are always fun to read. Joy also enjoys doll making.
It's not
creepy. Lastly, we'll be taking a look at the character arcs Gabby goes through. We first meet her when Tipper's on her own for the first time in high school, and she immediately becomes the girl's new best friend, their friendship extending all the way to college. After Mr. Namir tries to get legal custody of Tipper for the second time, Tipper runs to Gabby for emotional support, and Gabby confesses her love to Tipper, revealing to the readers that she is a lesbian. Gabby brushes this off by saying she loves her as a friend because A, now wasn't the time for a love confession, and B, she's worried that not only will Tipper reject her, she'll lose Tipper as a friend. Knowing she can't be anything more than a friend to Tipper, and wanting the girl to be happy, Gabby takes on a rather protective role when it comes to guys Tipper's either dating or interested in. While she may not like Cedric, she's willing to respect Tipper's choice to date him, and gets on Talmore's case for being indecisive about his own feelings towards Tipper. But unfortunately, we have a wrench in the works, in the form of Cedric's second girlfriend, Falco. She can tell that Gabby is interested in Tipper, and tries to get them to become a couple. Her intentions are good, but yeah, don't try to force two friends to be a couple if both of them know it ain't gonna happen, and especially if you're trying to force them into a same-sex relationship. Gabby admits her legit feelings towards Tipper, and things become seriously awkward between the three girls until Cedric forces them to talk things out by locking them in a room together. When Gabby moves on to college with Tipper, she encounters her cousin Charles and convinces him to move to the complex she shares with Tipper so he can help them pay rent and help Tipper with her studies, much to the initial annoyance of them both. She also figures out pretty fast that Charles is attracted to Tipper, and while she initially advises him not to pursue a relationship with her, Gabby later begins to plan to get them together out of a desire to see Charles be happy with someone, and thinking that it'll help her get over her own feelings towards Tipper. This eventually happens, but after Charles and Tipper become a couple, that leaves Gabby being the third wheel. Then we're introduced to Jacinda, someone from Gabby's art class, who starts a relationship with her. Unfortunately, it isn't an exclusive relationship, and it's honestly something that messes Gabby up on an emotional level, feeling that Jacinda doesn't quite return her feelings. It isn't until running into her at a party that Gabby confronts Jacinda and breaks up with her. Worry not though, for true romance does come to Gabby in the form of Joanne Cutter, a childhood friend of Gabby and Charles, who shows up prior to the wedding between Tipper and Charles and introduces herself as Charles's first girlfriend, and much to the annoyance of the little orange cat. After a bit of reminiscing, Joanne and Gabby become girlfriends. And unlike Jacinda, Joanne takes the relationship seriously, even being worried at one point that Gabby doesn't find her sexually attractive. Gabby is probably the character I got invested in the most after the reveal that she was a lesbian, especially with the plot of Falco trying to get her and Tipper to become a couple. I know what it feels like to worry that you may unintentionally alienate someone you consider a friend, and the fact that Gabby has unrequited feelings for Tipper makes the awkwardness between them all the more tragic. Gabby is clearly someone who cherishes the people she's close to, which is why she's protective of Tipper, has a genuine familiar love between herself and Charles, and genuinely loves Joanne, despite how exhausting the woman can be. She also kind of reminds me of someone I've known who also has an unapologetically blunt personality. There are certainly other arcs that occur during the comic, but who knows how long it will take for me to cover each of them. Some chapters are usually just short little stories that are meant to be humorous slice of life adventures of the characters, or get-togethers for the holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas. Though Halloween parties have also been part of the comics run since the early years. I honestly kind of like these chapters, since they remind me of when my family would get together for the holidays or just to visit. Stupid COVID. You may have noticed the art quality in some of these panels. When Isabel started, the panels would switch between being black and white and having pastel colors. The text and the word balloons were obviously typed in, and the panels themselves would be rather small and difficult to read. It was in 2002 that not only would the panels become larger so the text was more legible, but the art began to resemble what we see today, with cleaner line work and the pastel colors becoming more refined. A common trait for the art, though, was that some fur patterns would have a decent amount of shading, and that character's hair was given a sheen that would be with the comic from start to end. It's all very pleasing to the eyes as we get to the 2000s, and the art only seems to improve as we go forward. In regards to character designs, maybe this is just to me, but it feels like the characters all have same body syndrome. Since, excluding ears and tails, every mammal character has the same body shape with small muscles, including canine characters like dogs and wolves. Same goes for the dwarf family. Despite being the only recurring non-mammalian characters, every slug is pudgy, has gooey green skin, and eye stalks protruding through their hair. Maybe I'm just expecting a bit more of character design in this comic. There's also the fact that when Joy is clearly shaking blue in one chapter, I can't help but think that that motion could be more animated, since the chapter is focused on Joy being kind of obsessive, and she finds out that Isaac has a new girlfriend. It just looks a little stiff to me. Like I said at the start, the writing here is some of the best I've ever seen in a comic. It tackles some pretty serious issues. The trials and tribulations of growing up, family drama, reflecting on the type of person you are and the flaws you have, etc. It also has quite a good chunk of humor. June in general is always good for a laugh due to her likable personality, and works pretty well off of Gabby, who takes on the role of straight man to her girlfriend's unpredictable whims. I've already talked about how Tipper reacts due to what happens in a video game, but I also find out she mistakes Marla for someone Charles is cheating on her with rather than his half half-sister pretty hilarious too. Maybe I'm a terrible person for finding how emotional she can get when she thinks her husband is being unfaithful to her, but misunderstandings and misdirections are sort of a staple of Isabel's humor. Last thing I'm going to point out, how characters from Isabel's earlier comics tend to pop up now and then in cameos. From the very start of the comic, you'll get appearances from characters from, like Minerva, though mostly its main protagonist, Brisbane. It feels like Isabel wanted both the comics to take place in the same universe, but wasn't quite sure what to do with the UM characters, since one panel would imply that Kimberly and Brisbane are high school students when, and you say it first, they are adults living in an apartment complex. There are also panels where Brisbane looked like is a teacher at the high school Tipper and her friends go to. Now, this could just be a reference, but the tags seem to consider it a cameo. Years later, it seems Isabel figured out how to combine the two comics. I had You Say It First and Namir Deiter take place in different locations by the time Charles has his first meeting with Marla, who debuted in You Say It First, and it looks like Isabel took one of her unnamed characters from Wonder Kittens to play the role of Isaac's girlfriend. Insert cinematic universe joke here. And that's all I felt like discussing in this review. I'll leave a link to the comic's first chapter if you'd like to go read for yourself when you have the time. I highly recommend it. With all that said, this is Night saying thanks for letting me share my thoughts. Please share yours with me.